They say that love drives you crazy and a person can lose touch with reality. I can confirm this from my personal experience. The fact is that my wife offered me an inadequate idea which I supported, but I had no idea that it would completely destroy my marriage and reveal the terrible truth. I had a broad smile on my face, a very large one indeed. It wasn't surprising considering I was sitting there gazing at my stunning young wife, Wendy. She had reached 27 years of age, possessing a graceful stature, slim figure, and a prominent bust that drew attention effortlessly. Not too long ago, her assets had been even more prominently displayed, but I'm getting ahead of myself. There was no denying her beauty. So why would I be smiling while she cried, you might wonder? Let me explain. My smile was because she was crying, and I'd be glad to elaborate on the reasons. Listen closely. It all began less than 6 months ago, or at least that's when I first sensed a shift in the winds. Wendy and I lived in North London, where I worked for a local law firm, recently promoted to partner. Ashley, Burks, and Scrummings. Mr. Scrummings was on the verge of retiring. Ashley and Burks had long departed. 3 other partners, like myself, were eagerly awaiting Scrummings' departure so we could finally bring the firm into the 20th century. How long it would then take to catch up to the 21st century was anyone's guess. To say the least, our firm was a traditional, old-fashioned establishment. Wendy and I were enjoying our life together, a comfortable home, 2 new cars, a Jaguar and a Porsche, and membership at the local country club. Our intimacy was satisfying. No, it was more than that. It was very good. After 7 years of marriage, it seemed frequent enough to me. So everything was fine, right? Wrong. I didn't realize that until one Thursday evening. "Derek," Wendy said to me as we finished the last of our wine, "do you ever think we need a bit more variety?" "Why?" I replied immediately, holding up the empty bottle. "I thought you loved this Côte de Rhône as much as I do." It was one of our favorite wines, but I completely misunderstood her intention. "I'm talking about our intimacy life, not wine, you silly fool," she giggled. That caught me completely off guard. "What's wrong with our intimacy life?" I asked, once my initial surprise faded. "Oh, I don't know, Derek," she sighed. Sometimes I just wonder." Having brought it up, she wouldn't discuss it any further that night, leaving me to wonder about what she wanted to explore in our intimacy life. Which position hadn't we tried yet? Honestly, it sounded quite intriguing to me at the time. 2 nights later, she resumed her antics. You know how hard it is to stay focused in these situations. "Have you ever dreamed of being with another woman?" Wendy asked dreamily, continuing to bring me pleasure. "Yes," I replied. That's all I said, and it was true, but my short answer was mainly because I didn't want to distract her from what she was doing. "Anyone in particular?" "Oh my God, woman, just keep it up." That's what I thought, even though it wasn't really what I told her. "Your friend Gail, Mick's wife, or Halle Berry." I could keep listing, but of course I was just joking. Good. Maybe I wasn't really joking, but we were just joking, weren't we? "What if you really could do it?" she continued. "Of course, not Halle Berry, but Gail is quite reserved. But purely hypothetically?" I suddenly snapped back to reality. What was my wife hinting at? "You mean Mick's wife?" I asked, incredulous. That was quite a thought. Oh God, what a thought. Especially if you've seen Mick's wife. Mick's wife was intimacy appeal personified, with legs that seemed to go on forever. She flaunted them shamelessly in skirts so short they left little to guess. And her chest? Well, the less said, the better. This was becoming very intriguing. "No, silly," Wendy laughed, interrupting my thoughts. "I don't mean anyone in particular. I'm just having fun with this idea." Good God. What was my sweet, innocent wife hinting at in the past? Was she offering intimacy with other people or something like that? Oh my God, Sorry about Mick's wife, but let's see where this leads. Is there anyone in particular in mind? I asked, trying to sound nonchalant, trying desperately to get thoughts of Mick's wife's legs out of my head. Not really, she replied. Maybe we could switch couples or something. I was so lost in my thoughts that I barely heard what she said. By then, Wendy's actions had escalated into something more. Before I knew it, we got closer. It was amazing. In fact, it's more than just amazing. I lay there, satisfied. After that, we hardly spoke that night, making love until morning. Actually, I don't think we talked about anything at all. A few days later, we were sitting and watching TV. East End Residence, raw, she liked it, but to be honest, I didn't pay much attention to it. Have you thought about it? What is it? She asked suddenly. I think Ricky will end up staying with the girl, I replied, trying to remember what was happening on the screen. No, silly, she giggled. Not this show. About how to share. About me and another couple. What is it called? You mean The Swing? I asked, surprised by the unexpected turn of our conversation. Oh, so you've been thinking about it, Wendy exclaimed. Damn it. How could I get caught up in this? Well, if you're really interested, she said seriously. I could think about it. I could, but I'm not sure. Wait. Just wait a minute. Who was leading whom here? Where did you get these ideas, Wendy? I asked. It wasn't me who brought it up, she insisted. I'm not saying I'm not interested, but good. I'm not really sure. At that moment, I deeply regretted having drunk so much earlier. I shouldn't have finished that second bottle. Where was this conversation heading, and did I even want to go there? One of my clients from work is into swinging. Damn it all. Was this really my wife talking? Stop it. Shut up. Change the subject. But being the fool that I am, what did I end up saying? Who is that, Wendy? Bloody idiotic. Actually, what I meant was, what is his wife like? No, I didn't mean that. Damn it. Yes, I did. I felt ashamed. Wendy saw right through me and guessed what I was thinking. His wife is quite pretty, I think, Wendy continued somewhat casually. But I wasn't thinking about them, well, maybe I don't really know. I snapped back to reality. No. I pondered it for a few more seconds. No, Wendy, I asserted firmly. You can fantasize all you want, but I really don't think we should entertain that idea. That's all I was doing, honey, just fantasizing. Damn it. I knew from experience that every time she called me honey, she was up to something. One thing led to another. Despite being a solicitor myself, my wife, a barrister at law, spent her days in court persuading people to see things her way. Her mind was sharp and analytical, and she excelled at her job, often out-arguing me. Where Wendy fell short was in long-term planning and strategy. Without me, we might never have booked a summer holiday. No, Wendy lived in the present, always had. When we first met nearly 9 years ago, she had a wild side and a reputation to match. Not that she pursued just anyone, but once she set her sights on someone, he was inevitably drawn into her orbit, often ending up in her bed, willingly or not. I can attest to this firsthand, though it wasn't a terrible fate. However, I preferred not to dwell on her past escapades, particularly her multiple partner encounters. I knew about her history, but I didn't dwell on the details. It was all before we met. I sometimes wondered if it was mere chance that I became her main boyfriend after she finished university, because that's when she underwent a profound change. Perhaps she matured suddenly, or she realized her chosen career couldn't tolerate such recklessness. Regardless, I benefited from her transformation. She settled down and became the perfect, faithful wife, never giving me a reason to doubt her. Yet that didn't stop me from occasionally thinking about it. 2 weeks later, we found ourselves in an upscale bar downtown. waiting for James Bloody Perry and his wife to arrive. Yes, she had convinced me to at least discuss it with this couple. James apparently ran his own business making Christmas cards and such. It wasn't a large enterprise by any means, but it seemed to provide him a comfortable life. However, his wife was a mystery to me, and Wendy hadn't been forthcoming about her. Let's be clear. We weren't swapping partners that night, no way. We were simply meeting them for a drink. We might discuss the topic and ask some questions, but that was the extent of it. That didn't mean I wasn't nervous. At the same time, it didn't mean I wasn't curious myself. I had my share of experiences before Wendy, not as extensive as hers. But the idea of something different didn't exactly repel me. Honestly, my mind was in turmoil by then. When it came to Wendy, could a person really change their ways? Was this her subtle way of expressing longing for her past without betraying me? And what was I supposed to do if that was the case? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stuck in a difficult situation. Between a rock and a hard place, so to speak. Poor leopard. "Here they come," Wendy exclaimed, leaping to her feet and planting a kiss on some handsome guy's cheek as he entered. We introduced ourselves. Wendy, Derek, James, and Tanya. Good Lord, Tanya. James appeared to be around 30, possibly my age. Tanya, on the other hand, well, around, maybe, damn it, she was stunning. She couldn't have been much older than her early 20s, with a face you'd only find in dreams and a body that could turn heads. These two were swapping partners? Why on earth would anyone want to trade a woman who looked like her? The evening passed pleasantly, although I found myself somewhat at a loss for words when talking to Tanya. I learned that James was a Spurs supporter, which didn't exactly make me feel closer to him as an Arsenal fan. Nevertheless, we parted on good terms, with plans to meet again soon. Did you fancy her? Coming from my wife, that seemed like a silly question. It wasn't like I hadn't noticed the chemistry between her and James. Oh dear, the next few days were challenging. Wendy gently prodded and encouraged, subtly suggested and hinted, until finally the question was laid out. Were we going to do it or not? No. That was my firm response, despite the temptation of the charming Tanya. Fine, she replied. Let's forget about it. But she didn't, and truth be told, neither did I entirely. The following Tuesday found us back at the same bar waiting for the same attractive couple. Nothing was set in stone, but the possibility, however vague, lingered in the air. We had agreed to proceed slowly, to converse, to explore, to ask questions, and then to step back and ponder, whatever the case. In my mind, it was just another meeting, although I must confess I felt a strong pull. When I saw Tanya again, I was truly tempted. Her hair was long, dark, and glossy, her eyes large, dark, and dreamy brown, and her nose cute and slightly upturned. Tanya stood about 5'3", and with her stunning, vaguely Eurasian appearance could easily pass for a magazine model. In her short blue mini dress, her beautifully tanned legs seemed to stretch on endlessly. Yes, I admit it. I have a thing for long, slim legs. The first time we met, I hadn't paid much attention to James, but this time I couldn't help but notice how attractive he must appear to a woman like my wife. He was a bit taller than me, a little broader in the shoulders, and perhaps some women would find him more handsome than me. Damn him. If this guy thought he was going to get into my wife's pants, he had another thing coming. We had a second glass, and then a third, and as I relaxed, I enjoyed the conversation with the charming Tanya more and more. I heard my wife giggle and looked at our friends, noting how close they were sitting and how comfortable they seemed to be with each other. I wanted to say something, but it seemed unnecessary to me, because they didn't do anything that I would object to with anyone else. A little later, Tanya casually put her hand on my leg, telling me a story from her school days. It was a seemingly innocent gesture, although in fact her hand was halfway to my hip. I have to admit I even liked it. Well, of course I did, but my racing heart and dry throat made me act cautiously. I looked back at the other couple to see if Wendy had noticed. I didn't want to ask Tanya to take her hand away, but I also didn't want to cheer up the other couple. As it turned out, I had nothing to worry about. I was shocked to see how things had changed since the last time I looked at them, and realized that they were even closer than before. To my horror, James put his hand on my arm, just at the level where Tanya was holding me. That's when I noticed his other hand. I couldn't stand it. Wait, no. Too fast. Too hard. I wasn't ready for this, I exclaimed, struggling to contain my anger. James, Wendy, I don't like this. They both looked at me in surprise, and Tanya took her hand off my leg. What's wrong, Derek? My wife asked in a hoarse voice, which clearly indicated that she was enjoying James's attention. What's wrong? I echoed. He touched you, Wendy. Damn it, he's still doing it while we're talking. Wendy looked at James's hand, which, despite my intervention, was still doing it, and smiled. She deliberately leaned forward to kiss his cheek. So what, Derek? She said, turning to me. I don't mind at all. Actually, I like it. For God's sake, Wendy, I exclaimed. You can't let him do this to you. Why not? She casually retorted. Indeed, why not? Wasn't it painfully obvious why not? We didn't agree on this, and I certainly didn't agree for him to do what he was supposed to do and touch what was meant for me. We're in a public bar, Wendy, I reminded her, trying to keep my voice level. This is not the place to argue about this. The two exchanged a quick glance. Then Wendy turned back to me, her gaze fixed as if challenging me to disagree. You're right, Derek, she finally said. This isn't the right location. I felt relieved, thinking she had reconsidered. But it didn't last long. Let's go somewhere else, James, my wife said to the other man, her smile warm. We'll catch up with you tomorrow morning, James announced, getting up and linking arms with Wendy. Excuse me? What? You and Tanya can have our place, Wendy added, smiling at me as if it were settled. We'll go to James's place instead. Hold on, I never agreed. I didn't want this to happen. I didn't know what I wanted. Wendy kissed me on the cheek and left me standing there feeling stupid. My mind was trying to make sense of what was happening, and I must have looked stunned, gaping. Then Tanya stood up and clung to me, and at that moment my fragile resolve collapsed. That's when I lost control. I should have reacted differently. Maybe then things would have turned out differently. But maybe not. In any case, I stood helplessly, unable to intervene. I watched as my wife packed up her things, took James by the hand, and turned to leave. Enjoy your life, Derek, she said blithely. See you in the morning. I still couldn't believe that this was actually happening. Events overwhelmed me with disbelief. I watched in silence as my 7-year-old wife came out of the bar, chatting and laughing with James, clinging to his arm. What did I do or didn't I do? He was taking my wife away to be with her, and I didn't do anything to stop it. Are you ready to go, Derek? A gentle voice sounded next to me, and Tanya snuggled closer to me. Confusion. Wendy and James disappeared around the corner. I looked at Tanya, waiting for at least some kind of answer. That was my last mistake. I was a fool to the end. How could I resist a girl like Tanya? My eyes were fixed on her. I'm hooked. I smiled at Tanya, trying to express my uncertainty about everything. She smiled back at me, her dark brown eyes promising so much. But damn it, wasn't she incredibly beautiful? That jerk James even dumped me to pay the damn drink bill. An hour later, we returned to my house and lay in bed together. Honestly, what can I say? When she took off her elegant dress, my heart skipped a beat. There are attractive bodies and flawless figures, and I put Wendy in the second category until I met Tanya. They say the truth can be stranger than fiction. In this case, the reality has surpassed even the beauty of my imagination. Being close to Wendy has always been amazing for me. But Tanya, despite her youth, took me to new heights. How would I look into Wendy's eyes again, knowing what I had done and how incredible my feelings were? On the other hand, how would I look into her eyes if I knew what she had done? I couldn't help but worry about how good Wendy must have felt with James, and whether the relationship between us could ever be the same. But to be honest, at that moment, I didn't dwell on it. Tanya left at 9 in the morning after a kiss and a reassuring remark that they would see each other again soon, and Wendy returned at 9:30. There could not have been a better time for this, even if they had planned it in advance. Why didn't I think about it then? When Wendy came in, I was just confused. I was angry at her for manipulating me, but at the same time I was ashamed that I readily agreed to it, and I was confused by how much I liked it. "How was your evening?" Wendy asked cautiously. "Great. How was yours?" I replied. "Fine," she said, smiling. Pretty soon we were both smiling and laughing, but experiencing conflicting emotions. I realized that our life together would never be the same. I made an effort to mask my eagerness when Wendy mentioned she had tentatively planned to meet the couple again in a week. As the day approached, my wife informed me she had arranged to have dinner with James, and they would meet at the restaurant. Meanwhile, I was to meet Tanya at the bar where we first met. I was okay with this arrangement. While I looked forward to spending time with Tanya, I wasn't particularly upset about not having to socialize with the man who was involved with my wife. "Tonight, we'll be at their place, Derek, and this time you can visit theirs." That seemed fair to me. However, seeing Wendy prepare for her date gave me pause. "Do you think James will like this underwear, Derek, or should I not wear it?" It wasn't a question I wanted to entertain given the circumstances, but I had agreed to go along with this situation, so I had to accept it. I tried to imagine what Tanya might be doing at that moment, getting ready. Now, there was a thought. "The white ones are fine, dear," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. I just had to grin and bear it, though truthfully, I was never a fan of the white ones. As Wendy kissed me briefly on the lips before she left, I couldn't help but feel a lump in my throat. What on earth were we thinking? With a sigh, I closed the door behind me and headed off to meet Tanya, my date for the evening. Life was challenging, sure, but it could always be worse, right? 30 minutes later, I found myself at the bar, sipping my beer and waiting for Tanya to arrive. I anticipated the moment she would walk in, capturing every male gaze in the place and making them jealous of me. I wondered what daring outfit she would wear tonight and eagerly looked forward to later when we could be alone. After 7 years of marriage, I had to admit that dating another beautiful woman was exhilarating. Our meeting time came and went. Another half hour passed and I started to feel anxious. My phone rang and I relaxed, expecting Tanya to explain she was running late. "Hi, honey." Ouch. It was Wendy, calling me honey. "I have bad news, Derek. Tanya came home sick from work and won't be able to make it tonight." "Oh, damn it. Where are you then, Wendy?" I asked, trying to hide my disappointment. "I'm with James," she replied. "He left before Tanya got home, and she just called him to let you know she can't make it." "Damn," I muttered. "What are you going to do, Wendy? Are you coming home?" There was a tense silence on the other end. It was so quiet that I could hear my heart pounding. "Well, Wendy, what do you intend to do?" I asked again. "Well, Derek, I was thinking of still going on my date with James, if that's all right with you, honey." It wasn't. Not at all. A swap is a swap. But, well, bloody hell. It just wasn't fair, and I let her know it. "Please, Derek, try to understand. I know this must be disappointing for you, but James has just treated me to dinner, and we're having such a nice time." "Well, Wendy," I replied sharply. "I never really liked this arrangement to begin with, and now I've had enough." "Oh, please, Derek, just this one night." "No, Wendy," I shot back. "It's time we put an end to this." Look, Derek, what if I don't spend the night with him? What if I just stay the evening? I can't just leave him hanging now. I hadn't thought it through clearly, and what she said made sense. I suppose she had to stay and finish the meal. Fine, I reluctantly agreed. But I expect you home by 11. Oh, come on, Derek. I was thinking more like 2 or 3 o'clock. No way, Wendy. How about 1 o'clock then? She suggested. 12 at the latest, I found myself saying. Let's split the difference and say 12:30. Oh, damn it, what did it matter? Okay, I expect you home by midnight then, I reluctantly conceded. No, Derek, Wendy corrected me. I'll expect you back sometime after that. Remember, we have our place this time. The nerve. Go to his place then, I shouted into the phone. In that case, there's no way I'll be back by 12:30, honey. Damn that woman. She could always outmaneuver me in an argument. No wonder she won so many cases in court. Fine, go to his damn place, I replied angrily. I wasn't going to wait around in bars until it was safe to return home. See you around 2 then, honey. Wendy cut in quickly and hung up. The nerve, the damn witch. She had manipulated me into that, and I could picture her sitting there with a smug grin on her face. I could have called her back, but I didn't think it mattered. So she was going to spend the night with another man again, and I was going home alone. It didn't seem right. What bothered me the most? Was it that my wife was sleeping with someone else, or that I wasn't with Tanya instead? It was a tough question, and I wasn't sure of the answer. Maybe the most painful thing was knowing that Wendy chose to be with James that night, instead of me. That was painful. It left me feeling hollow inside. All right, so I have no clue what time she came in because I was fast asleep. It definitely wasn't the time she promised, but at least she was next to me in bed when I woke up. What time did you get in last night? I asked when she woke up. Oh, don't ask, was all she could manage. I'm exhausted. And why's that? As if I didn't already know. Oh, you better not ask about that either, Wendy giggled mischievously. She found it funny, but I couldn't say the same. I was really upset. I didn't understand why I let myself get into this swapping and swinging. Sure, I had a great time with Tanya, it was like a dream come true, but risking our marriage, risking the special bond I thought I had with my wife. No, it wasn't worth it at all. This had to be the last time. I woke up and dressed while Wendy rolled over and went back to sleep. I didn't see her again until early afternoon when she came downstairs full of energy. What a beautiful day, she sang, skipping over to me, wrapping her arms around me and kissing me on the lips. She was in a good mood, so I decided it was the right time to bring up the idea that maybe our swinging escapades should stop. I've set up another meeting with James for next Tuesday, Wendy happily informed me, beating me to the punch. Oh, really? Was all I could manage, feeling my temper rise. Tanya's still not feeling well, so maybe next time, Wendy continued. No. What do you mean, no? My wife asked, surprised. No means no, Wendy, I insisted firmly. I can't tolerate it. But you suggested it, Derek, she almost spat at me. You were the one who brought it up. I took several deep breaths, not wanting to say something I might regret. You're not going out and being with James or anyone else, that's final. And how are you going to stop me? She asked, matching my rising temper. A valid question. Short of locking her up or keeping watch over her all day, I had no clear answer. I can't physically stop you, but if you do it, don't expect me to be here when you return. Seemed like a reasonable response to me, but Wendy stared at me as if I had declared war. You don't mean that, do you? Try me, I replied. Wendy stood firm, but I refused to yield, so we locked eyes with hostility for a while. Eventually, she realized she might have pushed me too far, and she eased up, trying to reassure me. All right, she conceded. I see where you're coming from. It's not exactly fair to you." With that, she shrugged and wandered off to fix herself something to eat. But the truth was, she hadn't really understood my perspective at all. All she grasped was that it wasn't fair to me if she was enjoying herself, while I wasn't. It hadn't occurred to her that I simply wasn't content with our new marital situation. I may have won this skirmish, but it seemed the larger conflict was far from over. And no, I'm not talking about the war with France. This was much more serious. The rest of the day passed with little interaction between us, but that night in bed, she snuggled close and provocatively pressed herself against me. She was without outerwear, which usually meant only one thing. "Are you worried that I'm not paying enough attention to you, honey?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "Well, you know, Derek," she continued, "intimacy is not enough just because I'm dating someone else." "What do you think, Wendy?" "Well, you don't have to worry, honey," she murmured soothingly. "I still love you, and you're still my favorite in bed." "Is that why we haven't been close since you first went out with that jerk James?" I demanded firmly. "Is that what you're saying?" she gasped. "But, Derek, I mean, this. Oh, damn it. I'm so sorry, my love." Wendy enthusiastically tried to make amends, and we spent the next hour or so in bed. Finally, she sighed, thanked me for a wonderful night, turned over, and fell asleep. As for me, I lay for a while immersed in my thoughts. I thought that for the first time during our marriage, I had an intimacy out of pity. It wasn't terrible, but that's how I felt. It really wasn't what I expected from a marriage based on love, and I was already beginning to doubt whether our marriage would survive. "Tanya's feeling better now, Derek," my wife informed me a few days later. I waited for her to elaborate, but she simply continued with what she was doing. I did the same, not saying anything. How did I know she wouldn't leave it at that? "How about if I arrange something for next Tuesday?" she asked, trying to sound nonchalant. "Like what?" I replied, feigning ignorance though I knew she saw through it. "You can have our house again if you want," she said, as if her generous offer really mattered. "Is that what you truly want, Wendy?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "It's what we both want, isn't it, honey?" she responded promptly. "We enjoyed it last time, so why not?" I thought about reminding her that I hadn't enjoyed it at all last time. In fact, I had sat at home alone while she had the time of her life. But what was the point? "How about Wednesday instead of Tuesday?" I suggested, just to be contrary. "No," she replied firmly. "It has to be Tuesday. It must be Tuesday." Strange, very strange. But I decided not to argue and got up, walking away. There was something amiss. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was a discrepancy that bothered me. Why had Wendy suddenly become so eager for extramarital relations after 7 years of happiness? Why was she willing to jeopardize our marriage when she knew I wasn't fully committed? Why were our rendezvous always on Tuesdays? And how did James manage to marry someone as young and beautiful as Tanya? And having done so, why would he be foolish enough to look elsewhere? No, things just didn't add up, and I was determined to uncover the truth. With my connections, I easily discovered James Perry's address and found it was only a few miles away. The next afternoon, I drove over, unsure of my intentions, and ended up parked a few doors down from their house in my Jag. It was a detached house with its own grounds, undoubtedly expensive, indicating James was financially comfortable. For nearly an hour, nobody came or went, and I began to feel foolish. Then the front door opened, and 2 children around 8 or 9 years old spilled out into the garden. They played for a while before one shouted, "See you tomorrow," and ran off down the road, while the other returned inside. Seemingly normal, but not to me. How could someone like Tanya have a child that age? A good question indeed. While contemplating this, a Ford Focus pulled up, and a nurse in uniform exited the vehicle. I didn't observe whether she locked the car, but she proceeded straight to the house and entered. What on earth was happening here? I lingered a bit longer, but nothing else occurred, so I returned to work still puzzled. There had to be an explanation. Why was the nurse there, and where did the child come from? I was so confused that I could barely focus on my work, aimlessly wandering around the outer office and unintentionally bothering everyone. I felt foolish, but I couldn't shake that unsettling feeling gnawing at me. Finally, I realized I was overthinking it, and returned to my office to tie up a few loose ends. With some effort, I began to review the documents of a divorce case I was handling. A marriage dissolution both parties desired, but they disputed custody of their children. Then it dawned on me, simple really. The child must have been James's from a previous marriage. That was it. He must have divorced and remarried Tanya, and the child was living with them, or perhaps just visiting. But the nurse, who could she possibly be? It was an hour later that I figured out the answer to that as well. Tanya was ill, wasn't she? Or had been. Perhaps the nurse was making a house call to provide treatment to someone. It seemed like a plausible explanation, albeit a bit thin. Maybe I was overthinking things, but it was hard not to worry with my wife behaving so strangely. So everything seemed fine, right? But if that was the case, why did I have a nagging feeling that something was wrong? Just one more verification, and then I promised myself I'd relax and move forward. I called Tom Black. Tom was a private investigator our company occasionally used, so it didn't seem unusual to ask him for a simple check. He assured me he'd have the information I needed by the next day. I tried to put it out of my mind and focus on work, somewhat more successfully than before. Tom kept his word, emailing me his findings the following morning, obtained simply from public records. It was so straightforward. James Perry, age 34, businessman. Philip Perry, age 9, schoolboy. Mary Perry, age 32, nurse. That was everyone registered at that address. Damn it. What about Tanya? The nurse couldn't have been there to care for her if she was living there herself as James's wife. Bloody hell. By Tuesday evening, my thoughts were swirling in confusion, unable to reach a clear decision. I considered confronting Wendy about what I had discovered several times, but if there was a reasonable explanation, I risked appearing foolish to everyone. Moreover, our trust was already strained, and if she discovered I had investigated her, it might be the breaking point. No, I had resolved to proceed with the date and gather information from Tanya directly before confronting Wendy. I couldn't think of any other approach to handle the situation. Of course, assuming Tanya showed up at all, which was becoming increasingly uncertain. Hi, Derek. It's good to see you again. I turned to find Tanya standing confidently with a hand on her hip. She looked even more stunning than I remembered. Glancing around the bar, I noticed jealous looks from other guys, but in that moment I felt perfectly content. Tanya wore high-heel sandals and tight black leggings that were fashionable, paired with a flared skirt that left little to the imagination. Her legs looked amazing, and I felt an overwhelming urge to touch them. She looked beautiful, smiling at me in a way that melted my heart. It was her eyes. No, maybe it was her legs or maybe something else. No. Actually, it was her smile. No, it was everything about her. She was a dream come true. She seemed a bit surprised when I suggested we stay for a meal, but she agreed readily, and we headed to the table I had reserved. I needed to ask her some questions, and I wanted answers before this evening progressed further. "Who are you?" I asked directly once we were seated. "Tanya," she chuckled. "Surely you haven't forgotten me already after our last evening together." "Yes, Tanya," I continued. "I know your name, but you're definitely not James Perry's wife, are you?" Tanya's behavior changed dramatically. Her smile disappeared, her confident gaze dropped, and she swallowed hard. I obviously surprised her with this comment. "What do you mean, Derek?" was all she could manage to say. In fact, it was quite pathetic. What I'm getting at, Tanya, or whatever your real name is how did James, that worthless jerk, trade you for my wife when you're not even married to him? Gotcha. Tanya tried to smile at me, but changed her mind when she saw the expression on my face. She looked around, probably looking for an escape route, but I cornered her. I suppose I should confess, she finally suggested nervously. It's probably for the best, I replied, waiting for an explanation of what the hell was going on. Was Tanya his girlfriend? Maybe his daughter-in-law? Their next-door neighbor? I had no idea. Listen, Derek, she began. You're a decent guy, and I apologize if I was involved in this. I nodded, encouraging her to continue as she took a deep breath. They paid me for this, Tanya finally muttered. They paid you, I almost screamed. They paid you to date me, to sleep with me. What kind of woman are you, for God's sake? The kind who gets paid to sleep with strangers, she whispered back with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Derek, I really am. Damn it. Now she's caught me off guard. You're a woman of easy virtue. In the end, I exclaimed, forgetting that we were in a public place. Please don't be so loud, Derek, Tanya pleaded, looking around in fright. I prefer to call it a little different. It hit me like a bolt from the blue. James paid this girl to play the role of his wife so he could be with my wife. I was deceived. What the hell is Wendy going to say when she finds out what he's done? I demanded. It was a silly question. Clearly, I still wasn't thinking straight. But it was worse than I had imagined. I think she already knows all about it, Derek, Tanya told me uncertainly. It was her who rang me to arrange the times. Oh no, surely there must be some mistake. Yet deep down I knew there wasn't. Well, I hope it wasn't her that paid you, I muttered pathetically, unable to think of anything else to say. No, Derek, Tanya tried to reassure me. It was the guys that paid both times. I was so upset that I almost missed her slip-up. When I looked up at her, she had her hand over her mouth, realizing her mistake. Guys? I questioned. As in, plural? Tanya nodded silently, lips tightly pressed together. I took a slow, deep breath to calm myself before doing or saying something I might regret. I wasn't going to lash out at her, but I needed to gather my thoughts. Explain, I said finally, hoping that would be enough. There are 3 of them, Derek, she continued. James, Mike, and Terry. Terry was one of my clients, that's why they recognized me. I sat in silence, shaking my head. I'm sorry, Tanya put in. Thanks for nothing. I really enjoyed our first time, Derek, Tanya insisted. You're such a nice guy. And it wasn't like my usual dates. You made sure that I had a good time too. But when they offered to meet me again next Tuesday, I refused. After meeting you, I couldn't bring myself to cheat on you. So that's why she didn't come on the second date. That's why I sat there all evening and my stomach was cramping at the thought of another man with my wife. And then a realization hit me. It wasn't just one man. There were 3 of them. My sweet wife cheated on me massively. I felt a twinge of nausea when I realized that she was doing the same thing again, even while we were talking. I'm really sorry, Tanya whispered, gently touching the back of my head. I should have pulled away, but it strangely calmed me down, calmed my nerves. Why did you come back this time? I squeezed out of myself, banishing the disturbing image from my thoughts. They offered me more money, Derek, Tanya explained, and I realized that I want to see you again. So a woman of easy virtue didn't reject me, although I wasn't sure how much this revelation helped. We continued the conversation for some more time, during which Tanya frankly shared everything she knew. It was hard for me to believe how calmly I was sitting there, absorbing all this, despite the fact that tears came to my eyes several times. When Tanya took my hand and squeezed it, I didn't resist. Meanwhile, Wendy returned to her old habits and arranged a meeting with men in the hope that eventually I would be drawn into this lifestyle. Sitting there with Tanya, I began to doubt whether I really knew my wife. Can a leopard change its spots? Wendy had tricked me, but I was determined to find a way to get even though I wasn't sure how yet. At the moment, my marriage seemed irreparably ruined, dead as a doornail. But at that moment, I couldn't do anything, so what was I supposed to do? Then I looked at Tanya. She was stunningly beautiful. Why not? I've always been a pragmatist. Can we go to my place then? I suggested it. With pleasure, Derek, she replied with a smile. That's what we did. It helped. It helped a lot. Wendy returned early the following morning, appearing weary yet oddly rejuvenated. It was clear to me why, now. I wasn't merely seeking a divorce, a clean break. I craved vengeance, and I intended to exact it on all four of them. As she leaned in to kiss me, I subtly turned my cheek, enough to unsettle her but not to cause immediate concern. She would have plenty of time for that later. She stared at me, waiting for me to speak, perhaps expecting me to recount a pleasant time or inquire about hers. Instead, I looked away, silent. Let the woman figure out for herself what was on my mind. I had the beginnings of an idea, but to proceed I needed to determine their meeting place. It certainly wasn't James's house, given his wife's probable objections. I had deduced it had to be Tuesday nights, their regular excuse for being out. Whether bowling, drinking, or anything else didn't matter. I also needed assistance, preferably someone familiar with them who could gather the necessary information. Who better than Tanya? Besides, I had enjoyed my time with her, and it seemed mutual. I had learned quite a bit about her situation. She had been working as an escort for about 3 months, supplementing her income during a hiatus from her fashion design studies at university due to financial strain. It wasn't an uncommon story, but with her looks, she quickly found work at a bar and later behind the counter in a nightclub, where revealing attire boosted her tips. She chuckled as she recounted how she enjoyed teasing the men who ogled her daring outfits. The sequence of events unfolded, and she soon found herself drawn into pole dancing, where her immediate success was undeniable. It wasn't long before clients began asking her out, revealing the lucrative potential of her new endeavor. She justified her choices but ultimately dropped out of her studies, a decision she later regretted deeply when we met. So, there we were. And when we parted ways, Tanya was the one eager for another outing, with no mention of payment. I wondered if I was about to move from one difficult situation to another. Tanya gladly assisted me, and soon I discovered that Wendy and her 3 lovers regularly convened on Tuesday evenings at the Paramore Hotel across town. At least her companions weren't stingy, considering the hotel's extravagant reputation. But the price of hiring Tanya should have been a clue. Not only that, but I also knew their room number, a corner suite on the 2nd floor near the fire escape. Perhaps they anticipated a confrontation, leaving an escape route. However, I had no intention of breaking in, though they were in for a surprise. I eagerly awaited the next Tuesday. I didn't need Tanya that night for my plans, so I casually informed Wendy that I'd be out of town on business. "What will you do, darling, while I'm away?" I asked innocently. "Oh, I'll probably stay home," she replied, "or maybe I'll go to the movies with one of the girls from work." "Oh yeah, sure." The look in that woman's eye told me something else entirely. At precisely 8:30, I stood in the lobby of the Paramore Hotel, holding a newspaper as a shield. By my second beer, I spotted Wendy descending the grand staircase in high heels, a stylishly short skirt, an expensive blouse, and seemingly little else. Quite elegant. I couldn't deny she looked good, though a lump formed in my throat thinking about her betrayal. How long had she been deceiving me? If all went as planned that night, it was unlikely we'd share a bed again. For a moment I regretted not making love more often in recent weeks. Oh well. "Wendy?" someone called out. She turned and smiled warmly at a guy I didn't recognize. He had to be Mike or Terry. "Hey, Terry," Wendy called out, affirming my suspicions. Are Mike and James with you?" "They're already upstairs," he replied, lowering his voice as he approached her. Then he embraced her, drawing her close. Wendy responded by wrapping her arms around his neck, pulling his lips down to hers, sharing a long, passionate kiss. Just intimacy, huh? If that was mere inti, I wondered what true affection felt like. If there was any love left in my heart, it shattered. He broke the embrace, placed his arm around her slender waist, and led her up the stairs, his hand casually sliding down to rest on her curved bottom. Not only my eyes followed them as she giggled at something he said. I imagined most men watching couldn't help but envy them, knowing exactly what they were about to do. But all I felt was a hollow ache in my gut. The nerve, the betrayal, my damn cheating wife. However, I hoped that other observers were witnessing the tender embrace. But despite my efforts to scan the surroundings, I couldn't identify them. About 10 minutes later, the situation became clearer, even though I might have been the only one who noticed. 3 rather large men who had been sitting separately detached themselves and approached the reception. They were joined by a woman who seemed to be in charge, approaching from the opposite direction. I peeked over my newspaper, watching closely as the woman showed something from her jacket to the young woman behind the desk, who looked surprised. After a brief exchange, the young woman disappeared through a door behind the counter, returning promptly with an older, distinguished-looking man. Could he be the manager? Or perhaps his second in command? More words were exchanged, and it was evident that the manager handed a key to the woman, nodding in agreement. All of this unfolded clearly before me, though I doubted anyone else in the hotel was aware of the unfolding drama. Only when 2 uniformed police officers appeared and stationed themselves at the entrance did some people begin to take notice, but their interest was fleeting. Little did they realize how much more intriguing the situation was about to become. For that matter, even I had no idea how much more dramatic it would soon be. The 4 undercover police officers casually proceeded towards the grand staircase, aiming to avoid drawing attention. Swiftly, they ascended the steps and disappeared from sight. I sat there anxiously, contemplating how events would unfold and questioning if my actions had gone too far, possibly placing myself in jeopardy. Then, silence. Then, a sudden commotion. The police received a report about a regular party with the use of illegal substances in the hotel, possibly related to girls of easy virtue. Their interest heightened upon learning the identities of 2 participants, especially one with whom they had a contentious history. As for who tipped off the police, I honestly don't know, though I must admit I was privy to what was going to happen beforehand. Being a solicitor with certain connections had its advantages in such situations. I eagerly anticipated witnessing my unfaithful wife being escorted through the hotel, ideally in handcuffs and under arrest. Yet I knew it was unlikely my wish would be fully granted, and any charges might not stick. Still, it was her public humiliation I sought as retribution. I had really hoped to confront her about her cheating and infidelity. Of course, it didn't happen that way. It never does. But what did happen was absolutely incredible, beyond all my wildest dreams. Unbeknownst to me, or even Tanya for that matter, their group had rented not just 1 room, but 2. Whether this was to provide some of them a separate space to rest between sessions or to keep the noise of their escapades from disturbing other guests, I couldn't say. Knowing how loud Wendy could get when aroused, I'd lean towards the latter. When the police unexpectedly burst into the room, catching the 4 culprits off guard, it seems 2 of them panicked. One man was swiftly apprehended, but Wendy, bless her soul, managed to slip into the other room just in time. From there, she dashed out into the corridor and made her escape through a fire escape. It was only when she reached the middle of the parking lot, feeling the sharp stones under her bare feet, that she finally realized that she was still completely without outerwear. What a sight it must have been. Everyone in the waiting room stared in disbelief as a stunning young blonde, without clothes, rushed past the large windows. Two uniformed policemen instinctively gave chase, but Wendy stopped abruptly, realizing her predicament. I couldn't help but smile as I watched my unfaithful wife being escorted back to the hotel, her hands cuffed behind her back, and the escorts didn't even try to cover her. She lowered her head in shame and humiliation, unable to hide herself from prying eyes, and visibly shuddered when passers-by took the opportunity to capture the surreal scene on their mobile phone cameras. I mentally thanked the inventor of the mobile phone camera. Wendy staggered past me, only 10 feet away, too upset to notice my presence and sobbing uncontrollably. They forced her up the stairs. It's time for me to disappear. Never, even in my wildest dreams, did I imagine that everything would end so beautifully. Fourth, the outcome. Wendy was never charged with anything. Terry, however, was found in possession of a small amount of illegal substances and received a suspended sentence. Despite avoiding prison, his ambitions for becoming the local member of parliament were shattered, effectively ending his career and possibly his marriage. James faced divorce proceedings initiated by his wife, who claimed a substantial settlement. It seems he played a subordinate role in the scheme, manipulated by the other two, to deceive me directly. There's little more to add. But Mike. Well, it turned out that Mike was likely the mastermind. It emerged that he and Wendy had probably been having an affair for some months beforehand. He was the one who introduced his two friends to Wendy and conceived the idea of deceiving me into sharing my wife with them. So you're probably wondering how he fared. Well, Mike, or Circuit Judge Michael St. John Milesworth, didn't come out of it well at all. The media made a spectacle of it, to put it mildly. Some of the hotel guests who were taking photos must have tipped off the newspapers, and although I didn't stay to witness it, there were photos of him being escorted from the hotel, protesting with his hands cuffed behind his back, plastered across the front pages of nearly every tabloid in the country. My wife was helping a silk from her chambers in a court case at the time, and Milesworth was presiding over it. This greatly intensified the situation, and the story became the talk of the town for days. Questions were raised in Parliament, and even the Prime Minister got involved, demanding the judge's resignation on a TV show a few days later. His career was effectively over. While he may not have technically broken any laws, Mike would never practice law again. As for what happened to him, he seemed to disappear from public view. How unfortunate. Well, that's about it, really. Oh, wait. I almost forgot about my amazing wife, didn't I? Hi, sweetheart. I greeted her over the phone the day after the incident. Hello, Derek, replied Wendy, her voice tinged with sadness, though I pretended not to notice. Where are you? I'm still in Paris, sweetheart, I lied, despite actually being at a pub just a few miles from home. Sorry, but I'll be stuck here for a few more days. Can't you come straight home, honey? She pleaded, but I insisted it wasn't possible and that she'd need to wait a bit longer. Have you seen the newspapers, honey? She asked, her voice wavering. I haven't come across any English newspapers where I am, I lied again. Why? Oh, nothing, honey, Wendy continued. What about the TV? No, Wendy, I teased. I've been too busy. Has something interesting happened at home? Derek, it's nothing special. Well, could you please come straight home? Please, honey, we need to talk. As soon as I finish what I'm here to do, sweetheart, I assured her. Okay, she continued. Please, Derek, promise me you won't forget that I love you no matter what happens. Remember, you're the only one I love. I sensed Wendy was close to tears, but I chose to act as if I hadn't noticed. Yet, her strange comment didn't escape my attention. Well, if you love me that much, sweetheart, please don't let yourself be tempted by that scumbag James while I'm away, okay? All I heard in response was a choked sound from the other end of the line. I really meant to talk to you before I left, darling. I continued. I'm genuinely unhappy about this swapping and swinging situation you've involved us in. and I think we need to stop before it damages our marriage." "Okay," she choked out, "if that's what you want." "I haven't said this before, but I've been so worried that you might want to continue with it, Wendy. And I just couldn't bear that. It would be the end of us." "Oh, Derek," she cried over the phone, her sobs audible this time. "I love you, Wendy." I concluded our conversation with a promise I had no intention of keeping. "I'll see you in a couple of days when I'm back." There was a sob on the other end, but I chose to ignore it. I sat for a while, thinking about our conversation, then picked up the mug and took a sip. Unable to resist, I reached for the newspaper I was reading before I called Wendy. There on the front page was a clear photo of my wife, tears streaming down her face, as the police led her through the lobby of the hotel. These photos would have made headlines anyway, but when they showed a young lawyer caught with a senior judge, it became the main news. It went on for several days in a row, and for almost a week, photos of my wife were everywhere. Someone even managed to capture her rushing through the parking lot. The internet was literally buzzing with it. I heard she might have been offered a chance to pose for Playboy, but I'm not sure if that was true. We never met again to confirm it or have any friendly chats. She lost her job and ended up working as a legal assistant in a small law firm up north. I handled our divorce myself, and I saw her cry in court as the judge, not Mike, criticized her harshly. The judgment was not in her favor. That's the end of my story, which I hope you enjoyed. I have to go now because I have a date with a young woman who is graduating from university in fashion design. They say she has a promising future in the industry and has moved on from her previous career. Whether Tanya and I will last long term is uncertain. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment, aren't I?